which is going to be a technical session and is themed around robotics and RPA in internal audit. To walk us through this session, I'm pleased to be joined by Apurva Yatindra. Apurva is the partner with ANB in the telecom and the automation initiatives. He's a chartered accountant and is CISA by qualification, and is part of the leadership team of the business risk management vertical at ANB, and has more than 18 years of experience in internal audits, consulting, and risk advisory services. He leads the telecom vertical at ANB and services clients across multiple countries in Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa. He leads ANB's automation initiative and is actively involved in the development of the governance through a robotics platform. So I think there was some reference made earlier in the earlier session around digital native and digital expert, and we are hoping, Apurva, that you will help us take us up the value curve to the digital expert norm. So over to you, Apurva.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Burjan, for that introduction. And a big congratulations to the IA for organizing this wonderful event. I think both the panel sessions that we've had till now have been really informative and interesting. I'm sure all of us are aware our organizations are really adopting some of these new emerging technologies like robotics and AI, ML, and to varying degrees to bring in significant amount of efficiencies to their processes. So the question that I thought we'll try and address with the session today is whether us as internal auditors, are we ready to adopt some of these technologies and make ourselves far more efficient? So when we're not really haggling with or arguing or discussing and debating risk ratings with the auditees, what really is it that we spend our time on? So almost 60 to 70% of our time typically on any audit would be spent on the audit execution life cycle. So the three streams typically, we spend time on data collection, then we spend time on, once we get the data, we get into analytics, and once the analytics is done, we obviously get down to reporting those exceptions and how they should be reported. So those are the three streams where we really end up spending most of our time. Now, if we were to take a look at each of these three streams separately, on the data collection side, primarily this is one where while there are one or two automation technologies available, but this is one where largely everything is being done manually. We send our data requests to the auditees, and we keep following up with them. Sometimes the data that comes from them is not right, so there are multiple iterations. A lot of times, the data is unstructured, so we ask for unstructured ad hoc reports from the IT teams. And there are some organizations that are also using the likes of the ACL Exchange server, or sometimes there is SAP HANA as well, the HANA module of SAP, where again while it addresses the data collection issue for all the SAP modules, but not really for some of the other applications that the organization may be using. And then there's obviously data warehouses, where we can ask, as internal auditors, we can ask for some few reports for ourselves, and sometimes we get the reports from there. But like I discussed, the major challenge or impediment here is, there's a lot of manual intervention involved. There is a lot of back and forth that happens. Multiple iterations should be make sure that the data that we get is right. Sometimes the data is not complete. At times there could potentially also be integrity issues around the data, and significant amount of time goes in doing back and forth and waiting for the data to come. Once we do get the data, we get into analytics. Now here again, while there are a lot of options available, most of us have been using Excel and Access before. There's also, the likes of SQL. A lot of us write SQL queries, especially, people who've adopted the continuous control monitoring regime. ACL is also an option. Alteryx is also a solution, and a lot of people seem to be using Power BI, which is again, quite a popular solution nowadays. So sometimes the challenge with a lot of these, technologies is that, one needs to have very specific technical knowledge to be able to query write on these systems, which not necessarily, everybody has. That's why sometimes the rate of adoption of a lot of these systems has not been very, very widespread. So again, there is a little bit of manual involvement, and some bit of areas that can get better with this. Now, once we've got our exceptions, we then get into reporting. Now, while obviously, some organizations have started adapting the likes of Tableau and Power BI to report a lot of these exceptions. But by and large, I think 70-80% or probably even more of the setups are still riding on the likes of Microsoft Word and PowerPoint to do most of our reporting. I think majority of the people are still using Word and PowerPoint. Again, here, this is, there is manually, you have to write your reports manually, you have to write the observations, AQMs manually. And, again, it is very user dependent, very time consuming. So if I were just put the common theme across all the three streams together, while there is some bit of technology adoption that has happened, but there is still significant amount of manual handshake that still happens with all the three streams. And there is a lot of manual time intervention, etc., that keeps happening. So it's not really what one would term as seamless automation. While there are very good querying solutions, but it's not really seamless automation. So how do we get to a seamless automation state, if I can call it that? I think the approach will need to be one where we look at a unified approach for automation. So all the three streams, if they are able to sit on some kind of an integrated platform, where the system itself is collecting data, connecting to different systems, pulling out data from the systems for us, eliminate the manual intervention completely. Once we get the data, then we're able to build the analytical validation rules on the system itself. And once the exceptions come out from the platform, we should also be able to build good visualization templates for reporting and publishing those exceptions to our stakeholders. So if all of this is able to sit on a single integrated platform, I think that's where we are then really talking about real automation. So how would this, what all would it typically cover? So an integrated platform of this kind would basically extract data points from various source systems or shared folders, etc., like we do today. We'd be able to set up the analytical rules on the system. We'd be able to execute the analytics on the system. We'd be able to pull out the exceptions, name them, present them in predefined shape, sizes, appropriate templates. And also the last leg, where now typically as auditors, once we have our exceptions, we actually manually log on to audit management systems and upload working paper management, etc. An automated platform could actually, using bots, even really help us to do that last mile piece as well. So completely eliminating the entire manual involvement across the entire value chain. So just to give you a little more sense of how exactly this will work, typically this will involve three bots that will work in tandem for every kind of validation. So there will have to be a data collector bot, which will connect to either a source system or a shared path, like I spoke about. We could schedule this activity. The data will be pulled. We could schedule the frequency at which something like this will need to happen, and the data will end up getting pulled onto the integrated system. And once it is available, then the analytics bot will take over, which will then where you can design queries, you can construct validation logics. There are multiple ways in which that can happen. And again, here you can build in the frequency at which you want to do all of these checks. So it could be daily, weekly, fortnightly, depending on how often you want to review a certain validation. And once the exceptions come out, obviously the reporting bot will come into play. This will have good visualization opportunities. You'll be able to present the output in graphical templates, tabular templates, really strong, powerful visualization that will help us impact, create a significant impact of the findings, as opposed to what we're typically doing in PowerPoint and the likes of Word today. So the data collector bot will essentially connect to these. It could handle multiple kinds of data templates. There's no restriction on what kind of templates it could look at, and like I explained, you could schedule when this will run and how it will operate. So without laboring on the theoretical concept, if I could just show a quick video of how exactly something like this would work. So the scenario that you see here, this is one where a bot is basically logging on to an SAP like a normal front-end user, obviously with read-only access, right, so that it doesn't tamper with anything. Once it's onto the system, it knows we've pre-configured, what T code it will execute. It'll select the entity. In case of multiple entities, it'll select the time period for which data could be required. The example here is a vendor GL, where if you want to extract a vendor GL from SAP, how you do that. And once the data gets extracted, it'll then obviously come into a spreadsheet and get imported into the system. So the entire time that we waste in manual back and forth with our auditees today, multiple follow-ups, etc., that entire piece gets completely eliminated with this kind of a bot. Now, once this data comes in, obviously the challenging part is to then set up the validation logics. And the real skill or the challenge there is to ensure that the query building application is so user friendly that one doesn't really need to be a technical specialist to start setting up the validation logic. So all the typical if one were to be proficient in Excel, that's one should be able to set up queries like that. So for example, all your conditional conditions that we put, all the mathematical functions, the aggregator functions, the VLOOKUPs, etc., for reconciliations, different kind of checks that we do. All of those could be easily configurable on this kind of a system, so that the adoption becomes significantly wider, and it's not restricted to just technically proficient people trying to use these kind of systems. So again, to not labor on the theoretical concept, but just to give you a sense of how exactly the rules can be set up. So the example that you're seeing here is one where if one were to validate, let's say, material price variance for the same material code being procured from different vendors, how that kind of a check can be configured. So a lot of us do this. It's quite a common check that we do as part of our P2P audits. Where the data comes into the system, you can view how the data is available. You can set thresholds here to say that if the variation is more than 15%, 20%, only then it should come up as exceptions. So all of this can easily be configured, on the system itself, without really, understanding a lot of technical SQL query writing, etc. So in the example that you've just seen here, the system through the front end has been able to build up, an entire SQL query, while the user didn't really know SQL query writing. So once this has been set up, how does reporting then happen? How is this able to bring in efficiency for reporting? So if you look at the screen here, this is how the exceptions would typically be generated from directly from the platform. So right now, obviously, we do all of this in Excel sheets. So the example that we discussed, this is the price variance. Obviously, this is manipulated data, but 80% price variance, it's above the 20% threshold. So that's why it's come up. The max price, the min price, the average price for the same material procurement. And then obviously we could configure all of this onto, a very user-friendly and impactful graphical templates, where, the data can, once all of this is configured and there is every time that new data comes in into the platform, or every time that we perform a new validation, this entire graphical template will be automatically populated, and it'll keep refreshing by itself. So very powerful and impactful reporting. Again, to just give you a sense of how exactly it works, and typically the ease of use around this. So from the previous example, this is how a chart can be created from your basic exceptions. There are multiple charting options. One could pick which charting option to select. You can decide what needs to be on the x-axis, and what will be there on the y-axis. So the max price, min price, average price is what you want to compare for each material. That's what's come on the y-axis, and on the quick click of 5-7 buttons, you're into your chart, and that's how the chart will look like. One could slice dice the data here, and play around with the data as one requires. So now, once all of this has been set up, the entire process repository of an organization, could reside on an automated platform of this kind, with the RCMs of every single process, the controls, risks clearly defined and outlined. And at this stage, one will have to clearly sit through and map how much automation is possible. So what validations can be automated, what all cannot be validated. As long as there is digital data involved, one will be able to clearly automate almost 60 to 70% of the overall control or the audit universe. So I think significant amount of efficiency that can be brought into the work that we are doing today. And even in organizations where the internal digitization adoption rate is not very significant, that number will still conservatively be around 40 to 50%. So a lot of significant efficiency that one could bring to the table. Now, once all of this resides on this kind of a system, imagine the powerful reporting that us as internal auditors will be able to do. So the entire org level control dashboard could come out of this kind of a system, where in a single view, one is able to constantly report upon, what's the total control inventory in the organization, how many controls are working, how many controls are not working, because, all of this is now getting validated through automation, and it is getting published through automation. There's no manual, this doesn't need to be populated manually. So, on a month-on-month, one could actually end up publishing trending reports to the senior management to say that, these are processes that are working well, these are processes where there have been control failures, on a quarterly basis, what is going up, what is going down. So, the reporting impacting becomes significantly higher. And, from the dashboard, we could even give access to, the auditees directly, who could then drill down to each of the exceptional cases and actually go down to the actual transactions, where there have been control failures. So again, the level of the work that is happening, goes up significantly higher. Now, this is obviously, one way in which technology can be used for the internal audit work that we are doing. There is obviously a lot of other OCR techniques also that can bring in efficiencies for various aspects of the audits that we do. So, a lot of us in the financial service industry, banks, mutual funds, brokerages, life insurance companies, even telecom organizations, KYC, for example, becomes a very, very significant risk. And I think one of the most prominent items that all of us as auditors typically focus on. So today, when we are doing these audits, typically what we are looking at is, let's say, maybe some 100 new activations, 200 new activations, 500, maybe at max some, 1,000 odd activations. And that's the only, level of sampling that we're able to do, because this is all physical documentation. And we give our opinion based on that sample testing. Now, through OCR kind of technologies, you could actually scan the ID document of a customer, pick up all the mandatory demographic details like the name, address, date of birth, typical details that regulators look for, and then go and the system then validates once it's been extracted through OCR. The system then validates against what is there in your customer database. So you're able to cover, let's say, the last 3 months of new customers that have been onboarded, last 6 months of new customers that have been onboarded. So every the entire population of customers that have been activated, and you can confirm KYC validation for a significantly enhanced population rather than looking at small amount of sampling. And obviously, because this is all now a system doing this, the automation becomes significantly higher. The manual intervention, gets eliminated. Facial recognition. So, RBI, for example, has recently permitted video-based KYC validation for new customer onboarding. Similarly, the telecom regulator, for example, has allowed e-KYC for new customer activation, where a live photograph of the customer has to be clicked. Now, from the RBI regulation, organizations are expected to, validate the live photograph of the customer during the video session versus the specimen photograph of the customer on the ID document. So through OCR and using facial recognition technologies, we look at multiple parameters. One could easily validate the photograph, and percentage score could be a percentage score is typically generated that which the system will basically determine whether the photograph matches or doesn't match. Similarly, for telecom setups, the live photograph of the customer is matched with the specimen photograph on either the Aadhaar card or a driving license or a passport, etc. And then thirdly, for example, another potential use case, signature validation, wherever potentially that is an auditable step. One could match a specimen signature versus a specific signature on a document to confirm whether it's the appropriate person that has actually approved the document or not. So just to give you a sense of how exactly the whole KYC validation would work, this is how an ID document like an Aadhaar card, for example, there'll be a master template that will be created for every ID document, whether it's an Aadhaar card or a passport, etc. The coordinates, because it's a standard template, one could map the coordinates at which various details like name, date of birth, etc. will be available. And then once all of this initial mapping is done, the entire laundry list of image, ID images could be uploaded onto the system. The system would run the OCR and, as you see on the screen, extract all relevant customer information. Now, once this is available, you can build various validations on top of this. You could look it up against your existing databases. You could run validations around, whether the ID numbers have been tweaked to activate, not tweaked to activate. So again, the entire validation piece becomes completely automated. One more interesting use case for all of us, a lot of times we have to get onto external sources to pick up information for auditing. So one could program bots instead of us doing this manually. One could program bots to get onto external data sources, external websites, log in as users, and start pulling out this information. Now, again, the adaptability of something like this would only come in, if it is not too technical. So again, how will these bots be created? So you don't really need to be a techie to start creating these bots. So on the screen that you see here, the system will be able to configure the entire chain of sequence that one has to follow when one gets onto an external source. So what button to click, what drop down to click, what field to put in a username or a password field. What is the period for which, let's say, the bills need to be extracted. So all of that is easily configurable, set up on a system. So and lay users like me at least, we'd be able to do all of this by ourselves. So in the example that you're seeing here, this is an organization where every month they have to validate almost 100,000 plus electricity bills. And currently there are people who sit manually and extract each of these bills. So in the example that you're seeing here, all the bills have been extracted by the bot. Once the bills have been extracted, there is OCR that has been applied, on those bills, and all of this, all of the bill details are now extracted into a typical simple Excel sheet. Now, once we have all of this data available in an Excel, you can build in all kinds of validation logics around it. Trending of previous electricity bills, whether the rates that have been applied are correct, not correct, etc. So again, all kinds of audit procedures can be built on top of this. So So now, why should us as internal auditors, why should we want to look at all of these emerging technologies? So I think the biggest advantage that this is able to bring on the table is significantly enhanced assurance level that we are able to offer. So if you're able to automate almost 60 to 70% of your audit universe, that's significant efficiency that we're bringing to the system, as opposed to what we're doing currently. The level of assurance is significantly enhanced, because currently most of us, as part of our audit plans, we typically look at most of the processes or areas probably once a year. And obviously there are setups that have done continuous control monitoring for priority risks. But apart from that, most of the audit areas typically get looked at only once a year. So now you can look at them as many times as you want to, at whatever frequencies that one wants to. And then obviously the population that we cover, regulators globally, the level of scrutiny has gone up significantly. Regulators now want assurance on every single transaction. So it's no longer, risk-based sampling or, select transactions. Every regulator is now looking at assurance on every single transaction. So that's only possible if we are able to, bring in all of these automation technologies. Again, a big differentiator, again, the optimum utilization of an auditor's time. So, I don't think we should, I'd want to term what we are doing today on audit execution as inefficient utilization of the auditor's time. But, the real skill of the auditor is in trying to rule, is obviously to identify appropriate risks, but also to really root cause and apply the auditor's judgment on what the real issue is and where the control failure is, and really then go back and try to advise the organization on how this can be fixed. So that's really where the auditor will end up spending most of their time on, rather than spending 60% of the overall portfolio on execution and reporting. Then obviously, because of automation coming in, the manual error is completely eliminated. The level of accuracy that one is able to achieve with all of these automation possibilities is significantly higher. And more importantly, the audit procedures are standardized. One is then no longer dependent on an individual understanding of an auditor. People will come in, people will go out. Different auditors will have different ways of understanding processes, different ways of interpreting risks, and different ways of applying audit procedures around them. And sometimes it could be better or worse, but with automation of this kind, you eliminate that non-standardization completely. And then obviously we're all living in COVID times, where travel is a big challenge. One could travel across. One could do audits across geographical locations, across multiple continents, by deploying a system of this kind, centrally, where it is interacting with various applications, various processes, pulling out data, executing data. So there's no limitation on, on the processes or the applications that it could audit. So, very interesting example, with one of our clients, they have spread across almost 16, 17 countries. So, around the year, almost all of our teams would be traveling for 7 to 8 months to, across all the locations to do audits for them. With this automation now coming in, and obviously COVID nudged us in that direction to try to explore more of this capability. But now, that entire conversation has come, the whole travel conversation has completely gone out of the picture. The OP budgets, for example, the travel budgets and the OP budgets have been completely eliminated, because with the deployment of automation, one has completely eliminated the need of actually physically traveling across locations to go and do audits. So coming to the $1 million question for this kind of a forum now. So if bots and robots are going to be doing our audits, what happens to the internal auditor? Are we going to be relevant? Are we going to have enough stuff to do? I think the short and sweet answer for that is that all is well, and all will continue to be well. As long as we are willing to be proactive, and as long as we are willing to adopt these technologies, we will keep continuing to do well. So the role of the auditor will obviously change. We've got to ensure comprehensiveness. From spending a lot of time on execution, we'll have to make sure that the controls that are being monitored on these kind of automation platforms, that entire repository is comprehensive. any new and emerging risk scenarios, we'll have to make sure that we keep building in those scenarios onto the system. The frequency at which various controls need to be monitored, we have to make sure that that is adequately defined, and we keep looking at priority items more frequently. We'll obviously have to keep testing the accuracy of the configuration that we've done on these kind of systems, whether it's actually working well or not. So on a sample basis, we'll have to keep testing that. And then now all of this output is available on a single system. So there is complete trail of how and when checks need to be monitored. And no matter what the level of digitization, there will always be some processes, some controls that will be manual. So we'll have to keep looking at those manual controls. So to summarize, I think if we are open with our minds, and if we are proactive and agile in adopting all of these new technologies, we'll all continue to keep being well. So thank you so much for the session, and I hope the hope is productive here. Thank you. I think just managed to get in right time as well.
Thank you, Apurva. I think there were a few questions that were there, so I think we have time for just maybe one or two. So let me just quickly put out to you, saying that how can RPA be combined with data analytics software to have a more robust approach of both automation and analysis, so as to provide a more agile approach? I think while you did speak about analytics and RPA, I think the extra reference here is to agile.
Yeah, so I think all of it, since now this is on the go now, right? So once we have automation and RPA involved, everything is happening on the go. We can configure the frequency at which we want to look at various validations. So as and when issues keep coming up, straight away we're able to send these out to the auditors. In fact, once we're into a mature state of implementation, we could actually even have the our auditees with access onto the system as well. They could keep accessing this on an ongoing basis and keep looking at what's working well, what's not working well, what they need to fix. One doesn't really need to wait till the end of the audit, or till an audit report comes to them to start fixing issues. So I think it's a natural fit in the whole agile approach.
Super. Thank you. Thank you so much, Apurva, for your time and for your lovely presentation. I think it does bring to life. We keep hearing a lot about robotics and RPA and use cases in internal audit. And I think that last half an hour was very well spent in helping all of us better understand, how we can, bring all of that to life. Folks, we're short of time, so therefore I won't take any further questions, but ANB is active in our sponsor area. And I'm sure that if you drop in a question over there, that question will get to Apurva and he'll be able to respond back to you. So, once again, thank you, Apurva, for your time. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 5-minute break. And when we come back, we will be treated to a session with Richard Chambers. So take the next 5 minutes off, and I'll see you at 5:42.